The forbidden love. The room was silent except for the sound of Lyra's slow, steady breathing. She lay on the small bed, one hand resting on her growing belly. Daniel Carter sat beside her, his fingers wrapped around hers. His heart pounded, not from love this time, but from fear, a fear he had never known before. The news had just been announced across the galaxy. A new law had been passed. No human may marry an alien. No human alien child shall be allowed to exist. Daniel felt sick. His wife, Lyra, was not human. She was Zyphorian, one of the many alien races that had joined the Galactic Human Alliance years ago. Their love had never been easy, but now it was dangerous. Now it was a crime. "They will come for us," Lyra whispered, her violet eyes filled with worry. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. "I won't let them." His voice was firm, but deep inside, he knew their time was running out. The government's order. The new law had taken effect immediately. The government called it the Pure Blood Act, claiming it was to protect human culture. But Daniel knew the truth. The council was afraid. They feared what human alien children could become, a new species, stronger than either race. Already, stories were spreading. Families like theirs were disappearing. Some were arrested, others simply vanished. Daniel was a decorated officer, a war hero, but none of that mattered now. To them, he was a traitor. A sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Daniel pulled out his blaster and signaled Lyra to stay quiet. He moved towards the door, his military training taking over. "Open up, Captain Carter." The voice was calm but firm. Daniel recognized it instantly. Commander Riggs, his former superior, betrayed by his own people. Daniel didn't open the door. Instead, he pressed a button on his wrist communicator. A small screen lit up, showing a news broadcast. Any human found harboring an alien spouse or child will be arrested immediately. These individuals are considered a threat to humanity's future. Daniel clenched his jaw. The government was treating them like criminals. Another knock. Harder this time. "I know you're in there, Carter." Riggs' voice was colder now. "Don't make this difficult." Daniel turned to Lyra. "We have to go. Now." She nodded, already moving towards a small hidden compartment in the floor. Inside was a pre-packed emergency bag. They had planned for this. They knew this day would come. But it had come too soon. Daniel grabbed his bag and helped Lyra up. She winced, holding her belly. The baby was growing fast, faster than normal. Another mystery the government would want answers to. He moved to the back door, but just as he reached for the handle, boom! The front door exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Lyra gasped, stumbling back. Daniel spun around, blaster raised. Through the dust, he saw them. 4 armed soldiers, their weapons aimed at him. And in the middle, Commander Riggs. No escape. "Step away from the alien, Carter." Riggs' voice was cold, distant. Daniel stood firm. "She's my wife." "Not anymore," Riggs said. "The law is clear. She's an illegal." Daniel's grip on the blaster tightened. He knew he couldn't win this fight, not against trained soldiers. But he would die before letting them take her. Then, something unexpected happened. The lights flickered. The air around them shifted. Lyra gasped and clutched her belly. A strange, golden light glowed beneath her skin. One of the soldiers stepped back. "Sir, something's happening." Riggs' eyes narrowed. "What?" Before he could finish, the light exploded outward, knocking the soldiers to the ground. Daniel barely had time to react as the energy wrapped around Lyra, forming a protective shield. She was breathing hard now, eyes glowing with a strange purple fire. "What is this?" Daniel whispered. Lyra looked at him, fear and something else in her expression. "The baby, it's protecting us." The great escape. Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed Lyra's hand and ran. The shield flickered behind them, buying them just enough time to slip through the back door. Outside, the city lights were bright, the streets filled with people who had no idea what was happening. The government might control the laws, but it didn't control the entire galaxy. There were still places to run. They had to find the resistance. Daniel pulled Lyra close as they disappeared into the shadows. "We're not alone," he whispered. "We'll find help." But deep inside, he knew the truth. The hunters wouldn't stop. The government wouldn't stop. Because Lyra wasn't just carrying a child. She was carrying something that could change the future of humanity forever. The escape plan. The city was alive with lights, but to Daniel and Lyra, it felt like a prison. Every street, every alley, every building, they were all potential traps. The government's eyes were everywhere. The moment they stepped out of their apartment, they became fugitives. Daniel kept a firm grip on Lyra's hand as they moved through the crowded streets. His military training told him to blend in, to move without drawing attention, but it was nearly impossible. Lyra was visibly alien, with her smooth violet skin and silver hair. And worse, she was pregnant. "Keep your hood up," he whispered. She nodded, pulling the fabric tighter around her face. But it wasn't just her appearance that worried him. It was the energy. Whatever had happened back in their apartment, the golden glow, the invisible shield, it was coming from their unborn child. And now, the government would stop at nothing to get them. Nowhere to hide. The new law had turned the city into a hunting ground. Holoscreens flashed warnings about dangerous human traders harboring aliens. Daniel's own face appeared on one of the displays. Daniel Carter, ex-military officer, wanted for high treason. Do not approach. Report immediately. A sharp chill ran down his spine. They had wasted no time. Lyra gasped softly. They already put your face everywhere. We don't have much time, he muttered, scanning the streets for an escape route. That was when he saw them, a group of armored enforcers patrolling near the checkpoints. Their helmets gleamed under the artificial lights, weapons ready. The government was expecting them to run. The moment they tried to board a ship or leave the city, they would be captured. Daniel's mind raced. There had to be another way. Then he remembered. The underground network. A risky gamble. The underground network was a hidden resistance movement, made up of rebels, outcasts, and former soldiers like Daniel, people who had seen the corruption in the government and refused to obey. They had safe houses, hidden tunnels, and ways to get people off-planet without detection. But there was a problem. The only person Daniel knew who could contact the network was a wanted criminal. His name was Jax Riker, a former smuggler known for sneaking people and goods in and out of restricted zones. He and Daniel had fought together years ago, but Jax had long since abandoned military honor for a life in the shadows. If anyone could get them off-world, it was Jax. If he could be trusted. The meeting. Daniel led Lyra through the city, weaving between alleyways, avoiding checkpoints, until they reached a rundown bar at the edge of the district. It was the kind of place where criminals, bounty hunters, and desperate people gathered. A place where no one asked questions. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and low chatter. Flickering neon signs cast eerie glows over the crowd. Daniel kept Lyra close, scanning the room until his eyes landed on a man in the corner booth. Jax Riker. He hadn't changed much. Scruffy beard, cybernetic eye, a cocky smirk that never faded. He was drinking something dark, feet up on the table, looking like he didn't have a care in the world. Daniel approached, keeping his voice low. Jax. Jax glanced up and grinned. Well, if it isn't the war hero himself. And here I thought you'd be too busy following orders to visit an old friend. Daniel didn't have time for games. I need safe passage, off-world. Jax's smirk widened. Ah, so you finally decided to break the rules. Daniel leaned in. They made it illegal for me to love my wife. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking for a way out. Jax's cybernetic eye flickered as he studied Lyra. Then he chuckled. Ah, the alien bride. And, oh, she's carrying one of them, isn't she? Daniel clenched his fists. Are you going to help or not? Jack sighed, rubbing his chin. Getting out of the city is one thing. Getting off planet, that's a whole different price. I'll pay whatever it takes. Jax leaned forward. It's not money I need, Carter. It's a favor. The impossible favor. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Jax never did anything for free. There's a cargo ship leaving the sector in 6 hours. I can get you on board. No scans, no questions. But there's a catch. Of course there is, Daniel muttered. What do you want? Jax grinned. There's a man locked up in one of the government's holding facilities. A friend of mine. They're planning to execute him tomorrow. You help me break him out, and I'll get you off this rock. Daniel exhaled sharply. Breaking into a government prison was suicide. They were already being hunted. If they got caught trying to free a prisoner, there would be no second chances. But they had no other choice. Daniel looked at Lyra. Her face was pale, her body weak from exhaustion. They couldn't keep running forever. Finally, he turned to Jax. Tell me everything. The plan. Jax wasted no time. He pulled up a holomap of the facility on his wrist device. The prison is underground, deep in the industrial sector. Heavy security. But there's one weak spot. A waste transport tunnel. If we time it right, we can sneak in before they incinerate the trash. Daniel frowned. That's disgusting. Jax grinned. Yeah, but it works. Once inside, they would have less than 20 minutes to locate the prisoner before the guards switched shifts. After that, all exits would be locked down. Daniel sighed. It was reckless, dangerous, insane, but it was their only chance. He looked at Lyra, who gave him a small, tired smile. She believed in him. And for her, for their child, he would do anything. Fine, Daniel said. We do this tonight. Jax clapped his hands. That's the spirit. Let's go break some laws. The clock is ticking. As they left the bar, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He had spent years fighting for the government, believing in their mission. Now he was about to attack them. The line between hero and traitor was blurring fast. And deep inside, Daniel knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Something no law could stop. A desperate fight. The industrial sector smelled of oil, rust, and something worse. Burned metal and decay. Thick smoke curled up from vents along the massive, grimy buildings, and the air was heavy with the low hum of machinery. The prison was hidden beneath these factories, buried deep underground where no one could hear the screams. Daniel adjusted his earpiece, listening to the distant chatter of guards over the stolen security frequency. Every part of his body was tense. They had exactly 20 minutes to get in, find Jax's mysterious friend, and get out before the system lockdown. Beside him, Lyra leaned against a cold metal wall, breathing hard. Her pregnancy was progressing too fast, her body barely able to keep up. She was strong, but Daniel knew the stress and exhaustion were pushing her to the limit. Jax checked his holomap, grinning. Good news, security in the waste tunnels is light. Bad news, we're about to crawl through 600 feet of industrial garbage. Daniel shot him a glare. Let's get this over with. Lyra nodded weakly. Let's hurry. Into the depths. They slipped into the waste transport tunnel, a narrow shaft filled with steam pipes and conveyor belts carrying junk to incinerators. The tunnel's walls were covered in grime, and the smell of rotting metal filled the air. Jax led the way, his cybernetic eye flickering as he scanned ahead. There's a vent access point 2 levels down. If we time it right, we can drop in just before the next heat purge. Daniel didn't like this plan. Too many moving parts, too much risk, but there was no time to argue. They climbed down into the vent system, moving fast. The tunnel vibrated beneath them as machinery roared to life. Daniel's pulse spiked, They had minutes before the heat purge activated, turning everything inside to ash. Jax motioned forward. "We're almost." Boom! A loud explosion shook the tunnel. Red warning lights flashed across the walls. Security lockdown. Damn it, Jax cursed. They know someone's here. The rescue mission turns into a battle. The vent access door slammed shut ahead of them. Heavy metal locks engaged with a deep mechanical clang. Footsteps echoed through the walls. "They're coming," Lyra whispered. Daniel pulled his weapon, adrenaline rushing through his veins. No way they were stopping now. Jax pressed a device to the locked door and hacked into the system. "Give me a sec." The metal door slid open just as 3 armed enforcers stormed into the tunnel. Daniel moved first. 2 shots. 1 guard went down. The second lunged forward, swinging a shock baton. Daniel dodged, spinning, and slammed his elbow into the soldier's throat. The enforcer collapsed, choking. The 3rd soldier aimed his rifle at Lyra. Daniel's heart stopped. Lyra raised her hands. Then everything changed. The power within. A golden glow erupted from her body, pulsing through the air like a shockwave. The soldier was lifted off the ground and thrown backward into the tunnel wall, his armor shattering on impact. The light faded. Lyra gasped, stumbling as she grabbed her stomach. Daniel caught her before she fell. "Are you okay?" Her breathing was ragged, her skin too pale. I don't know what's happening to me." Jax whistled. "Well, that was new." Daniel looked at the unconscious soldiers, then back at Lyra. "The baby did this." Lyra swallowed hard, fear flickering in her eyes. "It's getting stronger." They didn't have time to process it. More guards were coming. They needed to find the prisoner and get out. Finding the prisoner. They moved fast, dodging security patrols as they descended deeper into the underground prison. The corridors were dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Jax checked the stolen security data. "Cell 17. That's our guy." They reached the holding cells. Daniel typed the override code into the console, and the door hissed open. Inside stood a man in chains, tall, broad-shouldered, with scars running down his face. His cybernetic arms flickered with broken circuits. Jax grinned. "Well, if it isn't our lucky prisoner. Been a while, buddy." The man stepped forward, his eyes burning with anger. "Jax Riker," he growled. "You have some nerve coming back here." Daniel frowned. "You two know each other." Jax chuckled. "Yeah. Meet Kieran Voss, ex-rebel leader. The government locked him up because he was a little too good at fighting back." Kieran's expression darkened. "I assume you have a way out." Daniel nodded. "If we move now, yes." A warning siren blared through the prison. "Security teams incoming." Jax smirked. "Guess we're doing this the hard way." The final escape. As they ran through the prison, guards poured in from every corridor. Blaster fire lit up the halls. Daniel fired back, taking down one too. He spun, kicked, dodged a stun bolt. Jax tossed an explosive charge. "Cover your ears." Boom! The shockwave blew open an escape route through the sidewall. Daniel grabbed Lyra and ran through the debris. Kieran followed, his cybernetic arms glowing as he crushed a soldier's rifle with one hand. Outside, a stolen transport ship was waiting. The pilot, a resistance member, waved them over. They jumped aboard. Daniel pulled Lyra close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. The ship launched into the sky, escaping the city's airspace just as fighter drones chased after them. "Hold on," the pilot yelled, dodging laser fire. The ship twisted, engines roaring as it jumped into hyperspace. They were safe. For now. The truth behind the child. In the quiet of the ship, Daniel turned to Kieran. "Why was the government keeping you alive?" Kieran exhaled, rubbing his wrists where the chains had been. "Because I know the truth," he said darkly. "That law they passed. It's not about fear. It's about control. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Control of what? Karen looked at Lyra's stomach, at the unborn child glowing faintly beneath her skin. The baby, Karen said. Your child isn't just a mix of human and alien. It's the next step in evolution. Daniel's stomach dropped. Karen's voice was grim. And the government? They will burn the galaxy to the ground before they let that child be born. The hunt intensifies. The stolen transport ship jolted as it dropped out of hyperspace, its battered hull groaning in protest. Daniel gripped the edge of his seat, eyes scanning the control panel for damage reports. They had escaped the prison, but the battle wasn't over. Lyra sat beside him, her hand resting on her stomach. The golden glow beneath her skin had faded, but the baby inside her was growing stronger. Daniel had seen what it could do, the protective energy shield, the sudden bursts of power. He didn't understand it, but one thing was clear. Their child was no ordinary hybrid. Jax let out a low whistle from the pilot's seat. Well, that was fun. I'd give our getaway a solid 7 out of 10. A little too much laser fire, but hey, we lived. Daniel wasn't in the mood for jokes. He turned to Kieran, the ex-rebel leader they had just freed. Start talking. You said the government wants our child. Why? Kieran leaned against the ship's bulkhead, his cybernetic arms flickering with residual energy. His face was unreadable, but his voice was grim. They're afraid, he said simply. Daniel's jaw tightened. Afraid of what? Kieran met his gaze. Of what your child represents. The future. The truth about the law. Kieran crossed his arms. The government doesn't make laws to protect people. They make them to control them. This pure blood act wasn't passed out of fear of alien influence. It was passed because of your child. Lyra frowned. That doesn't make sense. How could they know about our baby? Kieran sighed. Because they've seen it before. Silence filled the cabin. Daniel's chest tightened. What do you mean? Kieran glanced at Lyra's stomach. Yours isn't the first human-alien hybrid to be conceived, but it is the first to survive this long. Lyra's hand trembled against her belly. What happened to the others? Kieran's face darkened. The government took them, experimented on them, erased them. Daniel clenched his fists. He had served the Galactic Human Alliance for years, believing in its mission to unite the stars. Had he been fighting for monsters all along? No safe place left. Before anyone could speak, a sharp beeping sound echoed through the cockpit. Jax cursed, his fingers flying over the control panel. We've got a problem. Daniel turned to the monitor. A red warning signal flashed across the screen. Incoming ships. Not just any ships. Hunter-class interceptors. They tracked us, Jax muttered. Must have tagged the ship during our escape. Daniel's pulse spiked. Hunter-class ships were fast, heavily armed, and carried elite strike teams. They weren't here to capture. They were here to eliminate. Karen stepped forward. We need to land. Now. Daniel's instincts screamed against it. If we land, we'll be trapped. Karen met his gaze. If we don't, they'll blast us out of the sky. A heavy silence followed. Jax muttered under his breath. I know a place. The Shadow Market. The ship dived through the thick atmosphere of a desolate planet, dodging laser fire as the hunter ships closed in. Jax pushed the controls to their limits, weaving through storm clouds and jagged cliffs. Below them, the surface was dark and filled with towering ruins, an abandoned trading post deep in neutral space. This is the Shadow Market, Jax said, steering them toward a hidden hangar. If you need to disappear, this is the place. The ship touched down hard, kicking up dust and debris. The moment the engines powered down, Daniel turned to Jax. Where exactly are we? Jax smirked. Off the grid. The Shadow Market wasn't just a location. It was a city of ghosts, a place where criminals, rebels, and outlaws hid from the galaxy. Daniel didn't like it, but they had no choice. the bounty on their heads. They stepped off the ship, keeping Lyra hidden beneath a cloak. The air smelled of smoke and metal, and the streets were filled with traders selling black-market weapons, stolen tech, and illegal information. Jax led them through the narrow alleys, stopping outside a rusted metal door covered in strange markings. He knocked twice. A small window slid open. A single glowing eye peered out. Password. Jax grinned. You still owe me 20 credits. The door unlocked immediately. Inside, they were met with dim lights, the sound of quiet voices, and the unmistakable hum of stolen technology. The room was filled with people, hackers, mercenaries, and exiles. At the center stood a woman with silver cybernetic arms and a calculating gaze. Jax Riker, she said smoothly. Still getting into trouble. Jax winked. You know me, Sarah. Daniel stepped forward. We need safe passage. Sarah's eyes flickered to Lyra. Her gaze sharpened. And why would I help you? Kieran spoke before Daniel could answer. Because if we don't get off this planet, the government is going to wipe us out. Sarah studied him, then smirked. You always did know how to make things interesting, Kieran. She gestured to a large holoscreen on the wall. The moment it flickered on, Daniel felt his blood turn to ice. A galaxy-wide bounty. His own face. Lyra's face. Even Jax and Kieran. Wanted. Dead or alive. The betrayal. The room fell silent. Everyone in the market had just become their enemy. Jax cursed. We need to move. Sarah's smirk vanished. I hope you have a plan, because you just brought the entire bounty hunter network straight to my doorstep. Before Daniel could answer, the front door exploded. A team of mercenaries in high-tech armor stormed in, weapons drawn. Their leader, a towering man with a cybernetic skull mask, stepped forward. His voice was a low growl. Daniel Carter, he said, the government will pay me handsomely for your head. Lyra's hand tightened on Daniel's arm. Daniel raised his weapon, his mind racing. They were surrounded, trapped, and the entire galaxy was hunting them. The truth behind the law. The air inside the shadow market was thick with tension. The bounty hunters moved like predators, their armored boots clicking against the floor, their weapons aimed directly at Daniel, Lyra, Jax, and Kieran. Daniel's grip on his blaster tightened. His heart pounded, but his mind remained sharp. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about why the government had turned them into fugitives. At the center of the mercenaries stood their leader, a towering figure in reinforced armor, his cybernetic skull mask glinting in the dim light. His voice was like gravel, cold and unshaken. Daniel Carter, your bounty just tripled. The government wants you dead. Daniel exhaled slowly, his military instincts calculating his next move. He had fought worse odds, but this wasn't just about him. Lyra was weak, her body struggling with the rapid development of their unborn child. They couldn't fight their way out, not this time. And then, Lyra did something unexpected. She stepped forward. The child's power awakens. Daniel reached for her, but Lyra's skin had begun to glow again. Soft, golden light pulsing from her belly. It was warm, almost alive. The bounty hunters hesitated, weapons still raised but fingers twitching. Then the skull-masked leader took a slow step back. What the hell is that? One of the hunters muttered. Lyra lifted her gaze to the mercenaries. Her voice, though soft, carried a weight that shook the air. You don't understand, she whispered. You're afraid of what you don't know. One of the hunters gripped his weapon tighter. We know enough. The government says your child is a threat to humanity's survival. Lyra's eyes flickered. Then the government is lying. Daniel felt something in the air shift. A presence, a force he couldn't explain. It wasn't just power. It was something older, something ancient. Jax, for once, wasn't cracking jokes. He was staring at Lyra like she had just grown wings. Kieran's face darkened. The baby, it's waking up. The bounty hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Even hardened killers weren't sure what they were dealing with anymore. Then the room exploded into chaos. Escape through fire and blood. A hidden explosive charge went off near the far wall, throwing bodies across the room. The shadow market erupted in gunfire. Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed Lyra and moved. Karen slammed into a bounty hunter, crushing his visor with one cybernetic punch. Jax rolled behind a table, dual pistols blazing. More hunters stormed in from the back entrance. They weren't just after Daniel anymore. They were after Lyra. Daniel saw it in their eyes. They were terrified of what she carried inside her. He fired 2 quick shots, taking down the nearest attacker. Another bounty hunter lunged. Daniel dodged, grabbed the man's arm, and twisted hard until something snapped. Jax yelled from across the room. "I hate to break up this reunion, but we're about to have a bigger problem." A government warship had just entered the planet's orbit. Daniel swore under his breath. They had minutes before reinforcements arrived. Sarah's last favor. Sarah, the shadow market leader, reappeared from the smoke, her cybernetic arms glowing with built-in plasma cannons. "You idiots just ruined my operation," she growled. "If I let you die here, I'd be losing business." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Are you helping us or not?" Sarah smirked. "I have a ship in the lower docks. Get to it before the whole damn planet comes down on us." Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He pushed forward, guiding Lyra through the burning ruins of the marketplace while dodging bullets and debris. Behind them, Karen and Jax held the line, taking down bounty hunters as they advanced. A massive explosion rocked the underground city. The government ship had begun its bombardment. "We don't have time," Daniel shouted. The truth revealed. They reached the lower docks, where a stolen freighter waited, engines already warming up. As they boarded, Daniel turned to Karen. "Tell me the truth. Why does the government want my child dead?" Karen exhaled. "Because your child isn't just a new species." Daniel's chest tightened. "Then what is it?" Karen locked eyes with him. "The next step in human evolution." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Karen continued. "Hybrids like your child have appeared before. The government wiped them out, not because they were dangerous, but because they were too powerful." Daniel's mind raced. If this was true, then his child wasn't a threat. It was hope. The government wasn't afraid of destruction. They were afraid of losing control. Nowhere left to run. The freighter lifted off just as enemy ships descended upon the ruins. Daniel watched as the shadow market disappeared beneath clouds of smoke and fire. Their escape had come at a cost. Sarah had stayed behind, fighting off mercenaries to buy them time. Daniel turned to Lyra, placing a hand on her stomach. "We'll protect our child, no matter what it takes." Lyra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "We can't keep running forever." Karen stepped forward. "You won't have to." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Karen looked out at the endless stars. "There's a place where the government has no power, a place where your child can be safe." Jax scoffed. "You're talking about the Outworlds. That's a suicide mission." Karen smirked. "Only if you don't know the right people." Daniel glanced at Lyra. She nodded. There was no other choice. The war was just beginning. The final stand. The stolen freighter raced through hyperspace, engines humming with a strained whine. They had barely escaped the shadow market, leaving behind the burning ruins of what had once been a safe haven. Daniel stood at the cockpit, watching the distant glow of stars blur into streaks of light. Behind him, Lyra rested against a cushioned seat, her hand protectively placed over her belly. She had been silent since they left, her mind clearly turning over the truths Karen had revealed. Their child wasn't just a hybrid. Their child was evolution. And now, the entire galaxy wanted to erase them. The plan to fight back. Jax leaned back in the pilot's chair, boots propped on the console. "All right, big guy," he muttered to Karen. "Tell me again why your grand plan doesn't get us killed." Karen was staring at the navigation display, arms crossed. Because we're not going to run anymore. Daniel turned sharply. What? Karen's expression was calm, but deadly serious. We've been running since this all started. It's time we go on the offensive. Daniel folded his arms. We don't have an army. Karen's lips curled into a grim smile. Not yet. Jax let out a dry laugh. Oh, fantastic. You want to take on the entire Galactic Alliance with what harsh language? Karen ignored him and pointed at the holomap flickering above the console. A distant system glowed red, marked as restricted space. Outworld sectors. We're heading to the Outworlds, Karen said. Jax nearly choked on his drink. Are you insane? That's where civilizations go to die. The Outworlds, a lawless sector beyond Alliance control. Rumors of ancient alien ruins, failed colonies, and rogue warlords kept most people far away. But Karen's voice was steady. It's the only place they can't track us. And it's where we'll find others like us. Daniel frowned. Others? Karen turned to face him. You think you're the only ones the government has hunted. There are survivors. Rebels. Families who lost their children to this genocide. And they're waiting for someone to lead them. Daniel exchanged a glance with Lyra. He could see the uncertainty in her face, but also something else. Hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, they had a chance to fight back. A signal of rebellion. They reached the Outworlds after several hours of silent tension. The moment they dropped out of hyperspace, Daniel's stomach twisted at the sight before them. A planet. Dark, broken, and covered in endless wreckage. Abandoned ships and ruined space stations floated like corpses in orbit. Jax cursed. This place gives me the creeps. Karen remained unfazed. Exactly why it's perfect. As they descended through the storm-filled atmosphere, their ship's comm systems flickered with a scrambled transmission. Unknown vessel. State your intent. Jax quickly muted the audio. Great. Locals already don't trust us. Karen smirked. Watch and learn. He leaned into the console and spoke. This is Karen Vos, former leader of the Freeborn Rebellion. I'm here with Daniel Carter and Lyra of Zephyr. We carry the future of the Resistance. We seek allies. Silence. Then the voice returned. Proceed to landing coordinates. But be warned. If you bring the war here, you die here. The Hidden Army. They landed inside a hidden base built within the remains of an old colony ship. It was massive. A floating city made of welded scrap and forgotten technology. As they disembarked, Daniel immediately noticed the crowds gathering. Survivors. Hundreds of them. Some human, some alien, all carrying the scars of a battle they had lost long ago. And at the center of them stood a woman in reinforced battle armor, a deep scar running across her cheek. You must be the dead men walking, she said. I'm Commander Rhea. And if you really want to take on the Alliance, you'd better be ready to fight. Preparing for war. Inside the base, Daniel and Karen were led through a war room, where holograms of Alliance military routes and weak points filled the space. Rhea pointed at a strategic point in the core worlds. This is where we strike. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You want to hit the Alliance head-on. Rhea crossed her arms. Not head-on. From the inside. Lyra, still resting, finally spoke. What do you mean? Rhea took a deep breath. The Alliance isn't as stable as they want people to believe. There are officials, high-ranking leaders, who are questioning the government's decisions. If we exposed the truth, we could turn the public against them. Daniel exhaled. So this isn't just a war. It's a revolution. Rhea nodded. And it starts with you. Daniel felt the weight of those words settle over him. His whole life, he had been a soldier, a man following orders. But now, he was about to lead the fight of a lifetime. The child's vision. That night, as the base prepared for war, Lyra awoke gasping. Daniel rushed to her side. What's wrong? Her skin was glowing again, but this time, It was different. She was shaking, her violet eyes wide with fear and awe. I saw something, she whispered. Daniel's stomach tightened. What? Lyra swallowed. Our child. Daniel took her hand. What about them? Lyra's voice trembled. They're not just changing us. They're changing the future. Kieran stepped closer. What did you see? Lyra looked up, and for the first time, Daniel saw tears in her eyes. I saw the end of the war, she whispered. I saw the Alliance fall. Silence filled the room. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. They had been running for too long. Now, it was time to fight. The revolution begins. The war room inside the Outworld base was silent. The air was thick with tension, the dim glow of holographic maps casting sharp shadows over the gathered leaders. At the center stood Daniel, his fists clenched as he processed Lyra's words. I saw the end of the war, she had whispered. I saw the Alliance fall. Daniel had always fought battles with strategy, with weapons, with experience. But this was something else entirely. The child growing inside Lyra wasn't just special. They were destiny itself. The call to arms. Commander Rhea was the first to break the silence. We don't have time for prophecies, she said, arms crossed. If we're striking back, we need a real plan. Daniel straightened. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to fight. He turned to Kieran. You said we had people inside the Alliance who could turn against them. Kieran nodded. More than just a few. Some generals and officials have been questioning the Pure Blood Act. If we leaked the right information, we could cause a major fracture. Jack smirked. And what's the best way to break an empire? Make its own people stop believing in it. Rhea stepped forward, pulling up the holomap. The Alliance operates with control and fear. If we show the galaxy what they've been doing, if we expose the truth about the hybrid children they murdered, we'll create a ripple effect. Daniel studied the map. The Alliance's main broadcast relay station was located on New Terra, the core of their propaganda machine. If they could hijack it, they could send an unfiltered message to every planet under Alliance control. New Terra is heavily fortified, Rhea warned. You go in, you have to be ready to fight your way out. Daniel met her gaze. Then we fight. The strike on New Terra. The Outworld base was alive with activity. Fighters, rebels, and exiled soldiers prepared their ships for battle. Weapons were loaded. Supplies stocked. The mood was a mix of fear and electric determination. Daniel and his team boarded a stolen Alliance freighter, hiding their signatures to slip past the blockade around New Terra. Lyra, too weak to fight, stayed in the medical bay, watched over by Rhea's medics. Daniel sat beside her before departure, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. When this is over, he murmured, I'll take you somewhere safe. Lyra smiled weakly, resting a hand over her stomach. We'll be safe when they stop hunting us. Her glow was fading, but Daniel felt it. The child was still aware. It was as if they were waiting. Breaking into the core, New Terra's skyline was a vision of control. Massive towers stretched into the clouds, each one adorned with holographic banners of the Alliance's supreme leaders. Security drones patrolled the streets, scanning for threats. The stolen freighter landed in an old service yard, and the team moved fast. Disguised in stolen uniforms, they slipped past security, heading straight for the relay station. Inside, rows of data cores and servers hummed, controlling every broadcast across the galaxy. Kieran got to work, slicing into the system while Daniel, Jax, and a small rebel squad held off patrolling guards. Uploading now, Kieran muttered, fingers flying over the controls. Daniel fired 3 precise shots, dropping incoming enforcers. Jax took out another with a knife throw. Then the alarms blared. They found us, Jax shouted. Outside, troops were swarming the tower. Kieran's eyes widened. They've locked the servers. I need more time. Daniel gritted his teeth. They wouldn't get another chance. They had to hold the line. The final stand. Alliance shock troops breached the main door, opening fire. The air filled with the sounds of battle. Blaster fire, shouts, explosions. Daniel fought with everything he had. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. Jax rolled behind cover, tossing a grenade. "Carter, we're about to get cooked alive here." Daniel glanced at Kieran. "How much longer?" Kieran growled. "Almost there. Just keep them off me." More soldiers poured into the building. And then, the sky turned gold. The child's awakening. From the freighter, where Lyra lay resting, a pulse of energy erupted. A wave of golden light spread outward, disabling weapons, shattering enemy drones, and freezing Alliance forces in place. Daniel felt it deep in his chest. This wasn't just Lyra. The child had awoken. Through his earpiece, Lyra's voice came soft but powerful. "Send the message, Daniel. They're ready to listen." Daniel turned to Kieran. "Do it." Kieran hit the final command. Across the galaxy, every screen, every broadcast, every ship's communication link flickered. Then, the truth played for all to see. The fall of the Alliance. The message revealed everything. The government's secret extermination of hybrid children, the genetic experiments they had covered up, the fear that drove them to wipe out those who could change the future. People across the galaxy watched in horror. Cities erupted in protests. Allied planets declared independence. Even within the Alliance, military leaders refused to follow orders. The government's control shattered. And then, the final blow. The child speaks. Lyra, still glowing, stood before the freighter's transmission beacon. She lifted her head and spoke, not just for herself, but for the child inside her. "The future belongs to all of us. No more fear. No more war." For a moment, the galaxy stood still. Then, one by one, people chose their side. The end of the war. With their forces falling apart, the Alliance's leaders flowed into the shadows. Their armies crumbled. Their laws meant nothing anymore. Daniel stood atop the ruined relay tower, watching as the people rose up, no longer afraid. Lyra appeared beside him, exhaustion in her eyes. But something else, too. Peace. Jax whistled. "Well, that was dramatic." Kieran chuckled. "And yet, it worked." The future begins. Weeks later, as the galaxy began to rebuild, Daniel and Lyra left the battlefields behind. They settled on a peaceful world, far from the scars of war. And when their child was finally born, the golden glow that surrounded them was brighter than ever. A new age had begun. And the future, it had already arrived.